People were getting killed. No one cared. All right, so in order to bring to the forefront of public consciousness, they started to scheme. That's when they came up with the idea of the electric chair. They did some public demonstrations to sell the idea to the lawmakers. They executed dogs, cats, horses, eventually an elephant. And it still didn't have the desired effect. They ended up hiring best of the best attorneys to argue in front of the lawmakers in New York State. They said, hang in, it's too British, it doesn't work. Firing SWAT, that's too military, it doesn't work. Guillotine, that's French. Electric chair. Electrocution is the way to kill because that was the modern way of doing it. And as far as they were concerned, the United States had to take the lead. Eventually, the law was passed, and then the first execution was carried out in Buffalo, New York. They decided to use a Westinghouse power generator. So the New York State decided to buy a Westinghouse power generator. Westinghouse, seeing what was going on, they decided not to sell the Westinghouse power generator. The idea was, from Edison's team, was they wanted to coin the term Westinghousing stone. And so Westinghouse said, no, absolutely not. We're not going to let you use a Westinghouse power generator because the Edison's team was bent on using a Westinghouse power generator. His team went to one of these South American countries and they got themselves a Westinghouse power generator. Well, as you want to know, the first execution did not work out as planned. The term Westinghousing someone did not catch on. It backfired. Edison was a pacifist. He was against the death penalty. This was one of the things that he regretted for the rest of his life. And AC, being cheaper than DC, ended up winning the war of currents. All right, we still have AC today for power distribution. B. Right, so the best answer is going to be B. And not that he didn't like Tesla. It was nothing personal. This guy was a businessman. And he was afraid that he was going to lose his business. So B is the best answer. All right, so those of you guys who pick B, give yourselves 2 points. And those of you guys who said B, give yourselves 5 points. Tesla. So what happened to Tesla? Why is that his name kind of got lost the history until late 60s, early 70s?
Well, was certainly a genius of the first magnitude. If Michael Faraday could imagine space filled with lines of constant force, Nikola Tesla could picture multi-phase generators and multi-phase motors all connected with complex electrical circuits, and when they were built, all of it would work perfectly, exactly as he imagined it. Time and again, Tesla made fortunes and squandered them, or turned down soft jobs with fat salaries just so he could be left alone to think and to invent. You might say that Tesla, like Da Vinci before him, was a true saint of engineering. He died almost forgotten and almost penniless in New York City. But it was Nikola Tesla, at least as much as Thomas Edison, who shaped the nature of the world that we live in today.
No one since Ben Franklin had gone as far as Thomas Edison. But in his own way, Nikola Tesla would go even farther. Long before they became a reality, Tesla had envisioned vacuum tubes coated with phosphor and glass tubes filled with gas, fluorescent lights, and neon lights. And years before the Wright brothers appeared, Tesla claimed that if aviation were to get off the ground, it would need to use a then almost unknown metal called aluminum. And while Guglielmo Marconi got the acclaim of the popular press for inventing the radio, Nikola Tesla got the credit, as well as the final verdict in the courts. Speaking of credit, some state that Tesla was denied his due for many original inventions. In all, no one can deny that Tesla was one of the most dynamic scientists who ever lived, nor that his mind was fertile and inventive beyond compare. But Tesla, more interested in invention than in scientific publications, kept much of his methodology in his head. Perhaps that's why the scientific community remained dubious or miserly with its praise for years. He did, however, receive honorary doctorates from Columbia and Yale. And in the end, with unintended irony, Nikola Tesla was even honored with the Edison Medal, that most prestigious award named for none other than Thomas Edison himself.
All right, so he didn't get the recognition that he deserved within his own lifetime, evidently, despite the fact that a lot of people like to blame Edison for it. Big part of it because he didn't have any publications, or he didn't really explain how he was coming up with these ideas. This guy evidently was a savant. Ideas would just occur to him, and he would do a quick design, apply for a patent, and if he had money, he would build it. If he didn't, he would still keep the patent. He didn't really defend the patents. That's the reason why Marconi ended up winning the Nobel Prize. So that decision was eventually reversed by the Supreme Court. He didn't get the Nobel Prize, but at least he got the honor of the original invention. And towards the end of his life, I don't know exactly what he did, what happened to him. Obviously, during the Depression, Westinghouse company was going out of business. So in order to stay in business, they went back to him. They asked him to actually cancel his contract because he was getting a percentage of the earnings, and he was more than willing to actually tear apart the contract that he had. And eventually, by the time he died, he was penniless. And I think he was also a little bit mentally ill because he thought that he was married to a pigeon. And about the same time, he kind of got the recognition that he deserved in the sense that he got the Edison Medal, which is considered to be one of the most prestigious awards that you can win as an engineer, as it so happens. But he also should have won the Nobel Prize in Physics. Obviously, that never happened. Today, he gets the recognition that he deserves, obviously, the recognition that he did not have towards the end of his life.
The man who made possible most of our modern uses of electricity. Thomas Edison? No, it's Nikola Tesla at number 7.
Nikola Tesla is one of the most wildly inventive minds that the world has ever seen. He was hugely influential, to say the least, in creating alternating current and thereby setting a standard for all of the electrical power grid that we know today.
Nikola Tesla started working in 1882 at the Paris Edison Company. He tried to promote his idea of using alternating current. They were not particularly interested, and so he decided to go off to the United States and talk to the man, Thomas Edison himself.
He was given a lettered introduction to Edison. In fact, the letter said that there are two great electrical geniuses. You, Mr. Edison, are one, and the gentleman standing before you is the other.
But they very soon had some severe fallings out, in no small part over the issue of AC versus DC current. Tesla very strongly supported AC. Edison had a lot of financial investment in DC, and they simply could never reconcile those problems.
Often a stubborn and unyielding taskmaster, Thomas Edison pushed Tesla to work on the company's direct current generators by promising Tesla a financial incentive.
He said, if you could solve these problems, I'll give you $50,000. Tesla worked like a dog for months, corrected all the problems, brought the solutions to Edison and said, yes, thank you, now where is my $50,000? And Edison is supposed to have said, well, my dear Mr. Tesla, you don't understand the American sense of humor.
Edison's harsh demands and empty promises crushed Tesla, driving him to quit the company. Without work or money, Tesla became despondent, almost suicidal. At the last minute, a Westinghouse manager offered him his own lab. Finally, Tesla was able to realize his vision and was vindicated.
There was a competition between Edison Company and Westinghouse for the building of the City of Lights at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. The cost of distributing power through alternating current was basically half of the cost that was proposed by Edison. So Westinghouse won the contract, they built the City of Lights, and it was a clear demonstration of the tremendous advantage of AC over DC.
His victory with alternating current was a turning point. It opened the door for Tesla to advance radio, remote control, and a host of other technologies ranging from radar to neon lights, earning him over 700 patents and securing his place in history.
And we have liftoff of the Space Shuttle Columbia, continuing space research through tether satellite technology.
On February 25, 1996, NASA and Italian researchers made a bold attempt to harness the power in the atmosphere. They generated electricity with a satellite on a wire.
Good work. Let's make sure we stay that way. Understand.
The mission was part of a new experiment of tethering satellites in space.
Attitude verification. 3-14. Go ahead.
The experiment was based on the simple principle that when you move a conductor through a magnetic field, electrons start to flow. This generates an electrical current that can flow through a circuit. The satellite was thrust into space using small gas jets, and the 13-mile-long cable began to unreel.
If you put a wire inside of that tether, you now have a moving wire that moves across a magnetic field. That magnetic field in this case is the Earth's magnetic field, and the motion is the motion of the space shuttle moving at very fast, high velocities, orbital speeds.
Line down here, Joe.
The moving wire in the Earth's magnetic field generated 3,500 volts, enough energy to power a space station.
Okay, we see the tension go way down, but the tether's still going on fine. Very slight lateral oscillation.
The tether was clearly visible from the ground. It was one of the biggest man-made objects ever sent into space. For 5 hours, the tether swept through our planet's magnetic field, generating more and more electricity.
At the move. The tether has broken. It is going away from us. Get it on the TV, Quan. Please get it on the TV. The tether has broken.
Copy.
Trying to photograph it, floating away from us.
The wire was generating so much electricity that a spark jumped from the wire to the satellite deployment system and burned through the tether. NASA will try the experiment again because it could lead to a new, more reliable power system for space stations and help avoid situations like the Mir mishap.
What we're moving to actually is if we drive current in the opposite direction in the tether and we can force the current to go the other way, it becomes a propulsive device. So a propellantless spacecraft The next generation of space travelers may be using electric propulsion devices as opposed to chemical propulsion devices. A little Star Trek, if you will.
How was NASA able to generate current in space using a wire like that? They were just dragging it across their magnetic field. Somehow that was generating current. How's that possible? Any suggestions?
Well, it's just, it's no big deal. Then how are we going to do it? All right, fine, I'll do it.
How did the circuit know that somebody came in contact with the current from outside and then decided to shut stuff off? These circuit breakers, how'd they work?
Mama.
I'm not talking about the fuses, I'm talking about the circuit breakers.
Are you okay? I'm gonna lose that nail.
All right, so we talked about the Faraday's law, or that discovers that the current generates magnetism. Faraday discovers that using magnets, you can also generate current. The only thing you have to do is just keep varying the strength of the magnetic field inside a loop. Or change the area of the loop exposed to the magnetic field. So either way, you're going to end up inducing current.
But the effect
So we've
can be seen in
a simple experiment of it. So let's move forward. Okay, so we worked out the mathematics. Okay, so there's no magnetic field. And notice that you vary the direction of the magnetic field. So it's going to give you, there's going to be a flux. And then you can change the direction of you can change the flux by changing the strength of the magnetic field through the area.
The total magnetic flux through a surface is the integral of the component of magnetic field perpendicular to each bit of area that makes up the surface. As a loop of wire moves through the field of a bar magnet, the flux through the loop keeps changing. The changing flux causes a current to flow as if it were driven by a voltage. That voltage, called the electromotive force, E, is equal to minus the rate of change of magnetic flux through the loop. That's called Faraday's law of electromagnetic induction.
All right, so the negative sign is the one that we'll have to focus on shortly. Okay, whenever you're ready, just jump in.
A.
All right, those of you guys who said A, give yourselves 5 points. So it's how fast the flux changes in time, right? So that's the time variation of the magnetic flux is the best answer. So those of you guys who said A, give yourselves 5 points. Those of you guys who picked A, give yourselves 2 points. Okay, so Lenz's law is going to give us the direction of the current. So Faraday comes up with the Faraday's law, the law which is named after him, which is change of flux. It generates or induces current at some point. But the current was moving in a direction which was unexpected, and there was no explanation for it. And about 3 years later, Lenz comes up with an explanation as to why the current moves in the direction that it does. All right, so this is known as the Lenz's law. All right, back then, what took 3 years? Today, it would have taken only a few days to figure this out. So part of the reason is the bad communication at the time. It wasn't that easy. The second reason is not too many people did real physics at the time. All right? I don't know if there were 1,000 people working on something like this. All right, so Lenz's law, I'm just going to give you the formal definition first. And obviously, I'm going to be interested in your understanding of it. All right, according to the Lenz's law, the current is going to move in a direction that's going to oppose any change of flux. Okay, if you want to say it faster, you can memorize it, whatever. But if you don't understand what that means, then obviously it's not going to work. Okay, so there will be 10 multiple choice questions this weekend. I can almost guarantee you that 7 of the multiple choice questions will be about the Lenz's law. All right, once you get the hang of it, it's a really easy concept. But let's go through it visually and then verbally a couple of times until you guys have a good understanding of it. All right, so let's study this one. Notice that the magnet is moving towards the loop, which means that the strength of the magnetic field is going to increase within the loop. So according to the Lenz's law, the current is going to move in a direction to oppose that change. So what the current is going to do is it's going to actually oppose an increase of the strength of the magnetic field within that loop. All right, so the current is going to move in a direction that's going to oppose the increase of the strength of the magnetic field by inducing magnetic field moving in the opposite direction of it. That's what it means. All right, so that's the stuff that now we have to kind of visualize.